There was nothing remarkable about the way the night began. The air was cold, the streets were calm, and the Yale campus felt safe, as it always had. Suzanne Jovin left her job that evening expecting nothing more than a quiet walk and a familiar routine. Instead, her final hours would spark one of the most enduring and unsettling cases connected to the university. On a cold December night in 1998, a brilliant Yale senior named Suzanne Jovin walked out of her apartment above a police substation, telling friends she was tired and looking forward to sleep. She had just finished helping at a pizza party for mentally disabled adults, dropped off a draft of her senior thesis about Osama bin Laden, and returned borrowed car keys to campus security. 30 minutes later, she was found dying in the street nearly 2 miles away, stabbed 17 times in the back of her head and neck with her throat slit. She was still fully clothed, still wearing her watch and earrings, with a crumpled dollar bill in her pocket. No one saw her get into a car, no one heard her scream. And more than 25 years later, no one knows who killed her. Suzanne Jovin wasn't supposed to end up as an unsolved murder case. She was born in Göttingen, West Germany in 1977, where her parents ran the Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry. She was the kind of student who threw herself into everything. At Yale, she majored in international studies and political science, tutored elementary school kids, sang in 2 different choirs, co-founded the German Club, and worked in the dining hall for 3 years. She was 21 years old, weeks away from graduating, and by all accounts she had no enemies. Her murder would become one of the most controversial unsolved cases in Ivy League history, not just because of the brutality of the crime, but because of what happened afterward. Let's walk through that night, because the timeline is crucial to understanding just how impossible this case seems. At 8:30 in the evening on December 4th, Suzanne was at Trinity Lutheran Church on Orange Street, cleaning up after the Best Buddies pizza party she'd organized. By 8:45, she was driving another volunteer home in a borrowed university station wagon. She returned the car to a Yale-owned parking lot around 8:50 and walked 2 blocks to her apartment at 258 Park Street. Here's where it gets interesting. A few friends passed by her window sometime before 8:50 and asked if she wanted to go to the movies. She said no, she had schoolwork to do. At 9:02, she logged onto her Yale email and sent a message in German to a female friend. She said she was going to leave some GRE test prep books in her apartment lobby for the friend to pick up once she retrieved them from an unnamed person who had borrowed them. She even gave her friend the access code to get into the building. Then at 9:10, she logged off. That unnamed person has never been identified. Think about that for a moment. Suzanne mentioned in her last email that someone had borrowed these books from her, and she needed to get them back. She used the word someone in a way that suggested she didn't know this person very well. The books were never returned. No one ever came forward to say they were the borrower. This mysterious someone could be completely innocent, or they could hold the key to everything that happened next. We just don't know. Around 9:22, Suzanne left her apartment on foot to return the car keys to the Yale Police Communications Center at Phelps Gate. On her way there, she ran into a classmate named Peter Stein who was out for a walk. He later told the Yale Daily News that she didn't mention any plans to go anywhere or do anything else. She just said she was very, very tired and looking forward to getting a lot of sleep. Stein noticed she wasn't wearing a backpack but was holding 1 or more sheets of white paper in her right hand. She was walking at a normal pace, didn't look nervous or excited, and their conversation lasted only 2 to 3 minutes. Based on the timeline, investigators believe Suzanne returned the car keys around 9:25. Another Yale student, returning from a hockey game, reportedly saw her between 9:25 and 9:30 walking north on College Street. Though it was later clarified that it wasn't clear whether she was walking somewhere, waiting for someone, or just pausing to admire the holiday lights along the New Haven Green, and then nothing. At 9:55, someone called 911 to report a woman bleeding at the corner of Edge Hill Road and East Rock Road. That location was 1.9 miles from where Suzanne was last seen alive on the Yale campus. When police arrived at 9:58, they found her lying on her stomach with her feet in the road and her body on the grassy area between the road and sidewalk. She had been stabbed 17 times in the back of her head and neck, and her throat had been slit. The medical examiner would later determine that only one of those 17 wounds was fatal, and that the murder weapon was a 4 to 5 inch non-serrated carbon steel knife. They knew this because the tip of the blade was still lodged in the left side of her skull. Suzanne Jovin was pronounced dead at 10:26 at Yale New Haven Hospital. Here's the problem that has haunted this case from the beginning. It was virtually impossible for Suzanne to have walked from the Yale campus to Edge Hill Road and East Rock Road in the roughly 25 to 30 minutes between when she was last seen and when she was found dying. She had to have gotten into a vehicle, either voluntarily or by force, but no one reported seeing her enter or exit any car. A witness did report seeing a tan or brown van stopped in the roadway facing east, immediately adjacent to where Suzanne was found. But the New Haven Police Department didn't make this information public until March 2001, more than 2 years after the murder. Members of the Yale faculty said police were asking about the van privately from the very beginning of the investigation, but no explanation was ever given for why they kept it secret for so long. In November 2001, the New Haven Register reported that police had impounded a brown van as part of the investigation, but no link was ever confirmed. There's another witness account that the police sat on for nearly a decade. A female motorist told police just days after the crime that she was driving near Whitney Avenue and Huntington Street at about 10 in the evening when she saw a white male sprint past her and disappear into church property. She described him as a man in his 20s or 30s with an athletic build, well-groomed hair, dark pants, and a loose-fitting greenish jacket, running like his life depended on it in the opposite direction from where Suzanne was killed. The police showed her a photo of someone and even took her in an unmarked van to look at this person in his office to see if he was the man she saw running. She told them he was not the man, and investigators didn't contact her again. The Jovin Task Force didn't reveal this information to the public until June 2008, and they began hanging sketches of this running man around the neighborhood where he was spotted. They called him a person of interest, and some people started referring to him as Billy or the Green Jacket Killer, but he was never found. The physical evidence in this case is limited but significant. DNA was found in scrapings taken from under the fingernails of Suzanne's left hand. A Fresca bottle was found in the bushes in front of where her body was discovered, and it had Suzanne's fingerprints on it along with an unknown person's partial palm print. And of course, there was the tip of the knife lodged in her skull. The Fresca bottle is particularly interesting because the only store in the vicinity of campus that sold Fresca and was still open at the hour Suzanne was last seen alive was Krauser's Market on York Street, exactly 1 block south of her apartment. The store had security video, but police never asked to view the tape and never reported seeking help from store employees or customers about whether they'd seen anything unusual that night. The foreign palm print on that bottle has never been identified, and public calls for DNA to be extracted from it have gone unanswered. As for the DNA under Suzanne's fingernails, that turned into its own nightmare. Police didn't publicly mention the existence of this DNA until October 2001, nearly 3 years after the murder, when they asked Suzanne's colleagues, friends, and acquaintances to voluntarily give DNA samples. No explanation was ever given for why it took so long to test the fingernail scrapings. In 2009, Suzanne's parents wrote to Connecticut Governor M. Jody Rell saying that potential forensic investigations made possible by advances in technology weren't being carried out due to shortcomings in the Connecticut Forensic Science Laboratory. The governor's office admitted the lab had a backlog of 12,000 DNA samples waiting to be tested. Then in November 2009, the DNA results finally came back. The DNA matched a trace evidence technician in the Connecticut State Police Forensics Laboratory. It was contamination. After all that waiting, after all that hope, the most promising piece of physical evidence was worthless. Now we need to talk about what happened 4 days after the murder, because this is where the case went completely off the rails. The name of Suzanne's thesis advisor, a man named James Van de Velde, was leaked to the New Haven Register as the prime suspect. Van de Velde was a lecturer in political science at Yale and also worked for the U.S. Navy. The police became convinced, for reasons they never fully explained, that Van de Velde and Suzanne must have been having an illicit or unrequited affair. Suzanne's friends, including her boyfriend, considered this idea completely unlikely. 15 months after naming Van de Velde as their prime suspect, a sergeant at the New Haven Police Department admitted to a Hartford Courant reporter that from a physical evidence point of view, they had nothing to tie him to the case, nothing to link him to the crime, but by then the damage was done. Yale, under the guidance of Yale College Dean Richard Broadhead, canceled Van de Velde's spring 1999 classes, citing his presence as a major distraction for students. His reputation was destroyed. His academic career was in ruins. In 2000, Van de Velde and his colleagues pushed Yale to hire private investigators to study the case. Under additional pressure from the Jovin family, Yale hired Andrew Rosenzweig, former chief investigator with the New York District Attorney's Office, and Patrick Harnett, a former commanding officer of the NYPD's Major Crime Squad. It was at their insistence that police finally allowed the State Forensics Lab to analyze Suzanne's fingernail scrapings for DNA. When the results came back, before they were revealed to be contamination, they didn't match Van de Velde. The palm print on the Fresca bottle didn't match him either. Patrick Harnett labeled Van de Velde Richard Jewell with a Ph.D., a reference to the innocent man whose life was ruined by police publicity during the 1996 Olympic bombing investigation. But the New Haven Police Department didn't back down. They contacted the U.S. Navy, Van de Velde's primary employer, urging them to reconsider their contract work with him. Police even traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with Navy officials. The Navy conducted a thorough review and allowed Van de Velde to keep his job and his security clearance. Sensing the investigation had dead-ended on him, Van de Velde started writing letters urging Connecticut's cold case unit to take over. When the chief state's attorney refused, Van de Velde began pressing police to undertake additional state-of-the-art forensic tests on the evidence. He sued Quinnipiac University for wrongfully dismissing him from a graduate program and settled for $80,000 in 2004. He sued the New Haven Police Department in federal court, claiming they violated his civil rights by naming only him publicly as a suspect, while claiming other suspects existed. He added Yale as a defendant in 2003. The case was dismissed, then reinstated on appeal. Finally, on June 3, 2013, nearly 15 years after Suzanne's murder, New Haven and Yale agreed to a monetary settlement with Van de Velde. State's Attorney Michael Derington admitted publicly for the first time that Van de Velde was no longer a suspect in the murder. Think about what happened here. The police fixated on one man, leaked his name to the press before they'd even finished interrogating him, destroyed his career and reputation, and then spent years refusing to admit they were wrong, even after all the evidence cleared him. And while they were focused on Van de Velde, the real killer was out there somewhere. Yale's former head investigator, Andy Rosenzweig, finally broke his silence on the botched investigation in December 2018, just before the 20th anniversary of the murder. He said when people are fed a steady stream of reports that police already know who committed the crime and will be making an arrest soon, they tend to think of their information as unimportant and probably wrong. Sadly, we'll never know how many sources in the Jovin case never came forward because of this. The case was officially classified as a cold case in September 2006, 8 years after the murder, and moved to Connecticut's cold case unit, but it was never added to their website, and there was no mention of the reward being offered. Van de Velde wrote more complaint letters. In November 2007, it was revealed that the case had been secretly reassigned back to New Haven in June of that year. this time under a hand-picked team of 4 retired detectives. Assistant State's Attorney James Clark said no person is a suspect in the crime, and everyone is a suspect in the crime. The case is supposedly back with Connecticut's cold case unit now, though once again, there's no mention of it on their website. In December 2012, a group of area residents came forward with a potential lead. They told the Jovin task force that a former Yale graduate student had told friends he was convinced he would be imminently arrested for the murder, and then he committed suicide. The task force declined to pursue the lead. These residents filed a Freedom of Information request against New Haven and Yale, but the scheduled hearing was postponed at the city's request. In 2016, 2 members of a television documentary team also petitioned the Connecticut Freedom of Information Commission for access to law enforcement records. The request was denied in September 2017. The commission cited testimony that disclosure of the records would prejudice a prospective prosecution of Suzanne's killer. The Hartford Courant reported that Suzanne's clothing would undergo touch DNA testing. The FBI was re-involved, both new and prior witnesses were being interviewed, and a hypnotist was being hired to interview a key witness who may have seen Suzanne walking only minutes before she was murdered. So where does that leave us? More than 25 years after Suzanne Jovin's murder, we still don't know who killed her. We don't know who the unnamed person was that borrowed the GRE books. We don't know who the running man in the green jacket was. We don't know whose palm print is on the Fresca bottle. We don't know who was driving the tan or brown van. The city of New Haven and Yale University are still offering a combined $150,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Suzanne's killer, but the tips have dried up. A true crime series about the case called Edgehill was in development at the Esquire Network in 2017, but the network shut down before any filming began. In December 2019, a blogger named Jeffrey Mitchell released a documentary called The Green Jacket Killer in an attempt to force the state of Connecticut to finally DNA test the evidence using modern technology and to shed more light on the running man person of interest. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the brutality of the crime or the fact that it remains unsolved. It's the series of failures that followed. The police fixation on an innocent man, the 2-year delay in releasing information about the van, the nearly decade-long delay in revealing the running man witness, the 3-year delay in testing the fingernail DNA, only to discover it was contaminated, the refusal to look at security footage from the store that sold the Fresca, the dismissal of potential leads. Every misstep, every delay, every wrong turn made it less likely that Suzanne's killer would ever be found. And somewhere out there, someone knows what happened that night. Someone knows who Suzanne got into a car with, or who forced her into one. Someone knows who stabbed her 17 times and left her dying in the street. Maybe it's the person who borrowed those GRE books. Maybe it's the man in the green jacket. Maybe it's someone who's never been mentioned in any news report or investigation. But someone knows. Suzanne Jovin should have graduated from Yale in the spring of 1999. She should have gone on to do great things with her degree in international studies and political science. Instead, her life was cut short at 21, and her family has spent more than 2 decades searching for answers that may never come. Her case stands as a reminder of how quickly an investigation can go wrong, how tunnel vision can blind investigators to other possibilities, and how the passage of time can make justice harder and harder to achieve. If you have any information about the murder of Suzanne Jovin, the tip line is still active, and that reward is still being offered. Even the smallest detail, something that seemed unimportant at the time, could be the piece that finally solves this case. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.